Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is your host, Don McCauley. Today we're welcoming program author Kari Bovée, and she's the author of Grace in the Wings. Kari, how are you?
I'm great, Don. How are you?
Good. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, I live in New Mexico. I live in a beautiful home there. And I have horses right along the Rio Grande River, and I have a husband, 2 kids, and I love writing. I love what I do.
So tell us about your book.
Well, Grace in the Wings is a murder mystery that takes place in 1920. It's set against the backdrop of the Ziegfeld Follies. And Grace, the protagonist, she's an aspiring, albeit introverted, costume designer, and her sister Sophia, who's the extrovert, is the star of the show. And when Sophia is murdered early on in the story, Grace must step into the bright lights of Broadway fame in order to catch the killer.
Now, who did you write your book for? Who's your target audience?
My target audience is probably women anywhere from ages 30 and up. Anyone who loves a classic whodunit would love this book. There's an element of romance, romantic suspense, so anyone who likes romance, anyone who loves the world of Broadway show business, anyone who loves to lose themselves in a historical era, primarily the 1920s, history buffs, showbiz buffs, people like that.
So could you say there's any type of central message or perhaps underlying theme that you would say runs throughout your book?
Yes. So originally the book was titled Saving Grace, and I thought that was a wonderfully ironic yet thoroughly overused title because throughout the course of the story, Grace learns that she needn't rely on anyone to take care of her, pave the way for her, or save her because she has the power within herself, as we all do, to do those things herself. But because the title was overused and a bit cliched, I changed it to Grace in the Wings, which suggests that she's waiting in the wings to take control of her own life and her own destiny.
So if you had to choose, what would you say is the single most important idea you're sharing in your book that's really going to add value to the reader's life?
Probably the idea that although we have to live within certain confines, we can find freedom in that structure, that it can actually pull us out of our perception of what we are or are not capable of. Grace is beholden to Florence Ziegfeld Jr. and must comply with his demands that she give up her aspirations to be a costume designer and become a star, but within that framework, she discovers who she really is and what she really cares about, what her strengths and weaknesses are, and ultimately that she really has the talent and the freedom to choose for herself all along.
So if you compare your book with any book out there we might already be familiar with, which book would it be and why?
I'm not sure how many people know about this book because it came out just a few months before mine, but they will certainly know the author, and that is Elizabeth Gilbert. Her new book, City of Girls, is about women in show business in the 1940s and how these women navigated their own lives and their own destinies in their own way. While Gilbert delves more deeply into the philosophies of these women's lives, mine is more of a classic whodunit. There are still similarities in the flavors, the colors, and the themes of love and women's empowerment in both books.
What inspired you to write this book?
I've always loved the glamour of old show business. As a kid, I used to watch all those old black and white movies from the early 1930s, and one of my favorites was The Great Ziegfeld, starring William Powell, Myrna Loy, and Fanny Brice. I was so impressed with the dazzling costumes and over-the-top sets. So I wanted to write a mystery with a show business angle, and I thought I would resurrect Grace. It was a book I had started a long time ago, and at the time, I was involved in a different kind of show business and the horse show business. One of my horse trainers mentioned to me that her mother had been a Ziegfeld girl. I was fascinated by this and started doing some research to see if I could find anything on her. I couldn't, and many a girl tapped their way onto the Ziegfeld stage, and many of them weren't written about. But I read some other captivating stories about many of the girls and about many of the popular men and women actors who got their start with the great impresario.
So tell us about your writing process.
I'm a plotter, Well, actually, I'm somewhere in between a pantser and a plotter. I like to refer to myself as a puzzler. I like to have an outline and to know where I'm going in order to write. So my process begins with extensive research. Then, as I am researching, a story idea starts to form. I make an outline of the major and minor plot points, and then I start writing. And I usually have to write up to 75 pages before I really know where the story is headed. Then I readjust the plot line, and sometimes after I start writing in earnest, something will pop up on the page that I wasn't expecting. I usually have to stop and consider that thing, whether it's something about a character or a change in the plot, and then adjust accordingly again. I usually have to conduct research throughout the entire writing process, but to me that's what makes it fun. I'm always discovering new things when the creative juices are flowing. It's like putting together a puzzle that is always changing.
So what's been your greatest challenge as a writer?
Time. Finding the time to do everything, because being a writer now means we have to wear so many hats. We have to be the writer, we have to be the editor, the marketing expert, the business manager, the promoter. The list goes on and on. So it's hard to imagine all of that and have a life outside of writing. It's a constant balancing act. And I'm not sure I've overcome it at all, but I just try to take it one day at a time.
Which writers have inspired you?
I've been inspired by a lot of the classics, particularly 19th century English literature. I loved reading Dickens, Austen, and the Bronte sisters, among others. Modern-day inspirations include Rhys Bowen, Deanna Rayburn, Anne Perry, Stephanie Barron, who also writes as Francine Matthews, and Kari Greenwood.
Now, you have a number of historical figures that you weave throughout the book. Tell us about that.
Yes, I do have a number of historic figures, and one of the most fun to write about was probably Fanny Bryce. I fell in love with the portrayal of her in the Barbra Streisand movies Funny Girl and Funny Lady. She was not your typical showgirl beauty, but she had charisma, talent, and a wicked sense of humor. And in researching her, I was impressed with her dogged determination to be in show business despite her atypical looks. She knew she had something to offer that people really wanted to see and hear. And in addition to her comedic wit, she was a great singer and dancer. She was the whole package. And in Grace in the Wings, she plays confidant and mentor to Grace, and she also helps Grace to take life and herself a little less seriously, which is something I think we all need to do from time to time.
So Grace in the Wings takes place in the 20s. What do you think it is about that time period that captures the imagination?
I think the 1920s represented a new freedom and a little bit of danger, and I think those two elements are captivating to people. In the early 1920s, there was economic prosperity. We were coming off of World War I, and there was a certain optimism in the country. I think people collectively made the decision to live life to the fullest and to be wild and creative and free. The war gave women the confidence to stand on their own, and they reveled in making decisions for themselves and to break free from the roles society had placed on them. The era created a new mindset for people, and that mindset and freedom created change and new opportunities for everyone, even those with more dubious motives.
Now, did your environment or upbringing play any major role in your writing?
Yes, my parents always encouraged reading, especially my dad. I always had plenty of books to pore over, and I also liked the idea of typing. So when I was very young, I was 7 years old, I asked for a typewriter for Christmas, and to my great delight, I got it, and I nearly wore the thing out over the next several years. As far as my environment influencing content, I'd say the most influence from my environment that I received was I have horses in nearly all of my books, and I grew up with horses. I was a rather late bloomer athletically, and my parents felt it was important that I have some sort of physical outlet. So they introduced me to horses when I was 11, and we all found out that I had some talent with riding. So from then on, I always had horses in my life, and I spent many years competing with them, but now I just enjoy riding for pleasure, and they bring me so much inspiration into my riding life and actually into my personal life. Working with them has made me a better human being.
So what's been your most rewarding experience since publishing your book?
I love finding a connection with people. And when I've made that kind of connection through my work, it's really gratifying. I love it when someone tells me that reading my book inspired them to look further into the historical subject matter I've presented. It's like finding something in common with someone you've just met. Instant connection, and I find that really cool.
So how would you describe your writing style?
I think I have a pretty clean, fast-paced, visual writing style. Many people tell me they can see the action and setting, and they are right there in the moment with my characters. My writing is very cinematic. When I'm writing a scene, I see it playing out before me like a movie, so I guess that's why it comes across in my writing.
So are your characters pure fiction, or do you draw from people you know in real life?
Many of my characters in my books are drawn from actual historical figures. I research them and try my best to create them authentically. Others are inspired from historical figures. I take certain characteristics from that historical figure and infuse them into a character that has come from my imagination. And I've taken characteristics and personality traits from people I know and have given them to some of my characters.
If you had to choose, would you say you're more of a character artist or more a plot-driven writer?
I always start with the plot, what's going to happen in the story. Then I start drawing up some character sketches. What are their ghosts? How were they raised? What are their fears, their passions, etc.? Creating the plot first, though, helps me to create my characters because I have to figure out how they would respond to that action of the plot. The full development of my characters often happen as I'm writing. Sometimes my character will do or say something that surprises me, and then I have to take stock of that and figure out what that means and how it relates to the story.
So other than selling your book, of course, is there anything else you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, I think it would make a fabulous PBS historical drama, but I haven't figured out how to make that happen yet.
So in your opinion, who should buy your book?
Anyone who loves mystery or history, romance, anyone who loves the colorful world of show business, anyone who likes, the classic whodunit, and also anyone who really wants to escape from the reality of their life and go back in time and relive someone else's.
So do you have a website?
I do, and I also have a blog on that website about empowered women in history, and you can find it at karibovee.com.
Could you spell your name for us, please?
Sure. Karib as in boy, O, V as in Victor, EE.com.
Well, this has been just great. Our guest today has been Kari Bovée, and she's the author of Grace in the Wings. Kari, thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
This is Don McCauley wrapping up another edition of The Author Show. Go out there, buy the book today, and please share this interview with your friends so that they too have the opportunity to discover our guests and their work. Remember, The Author Show can be accessed at any time at theauthorshow.com. Selected interviews can also be found on major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and many more. And whether you're an author who would like to be featured or a reader in search of new books to read, The Author Show is a great place to start. Check us daily as we continue to introduce wonderful authors of very interesting books on The Author Show.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.